In case you're in the wrong class, this is data mining management and analytics for use in the SCA. A little bit about myself before we get started. So my name is Minsu Yun, and I am teaching this class because mundanely I am a data scientist. I got my master's in it, and I've been working in the field for quite a few years in different capacities. And I started putting together this class because, data is everything to me. And, I want to see people be able to gather data and keep data and use data correctly. And feel free to interrupt me at any time with any questions, and I'll answer them as we go along. So the first step for data is data mining. This is the use of extracting usable data from a larger set of any raw data. And in the SCA, specifically, there are 3 ways that you can collect data. There's your typical surveys or interviews. You could have focus groups, which is taking groups that have a focus in generals, have a focus, and basically it's like a work group where you take people who have this certain focus and get their observations and opinions about things to answer a question. And then your final way that you can collect data is through observations or web scraping. So this is stuff like going to a Facebook page and seeing how many people say they're going to go to an event. Or, specifically for Zoom, there's a way to look at how many people show up to a Zoom event in their data summaries that Zoom prints out for the Zoom host. And all of these techniques can be used in the SCA. We're going to focus mostly on the surveys and interviews because that is the one that I see most often being used in the SCA, and those are the least straightforward, actually. So when you're putting together your surveys or interviews, there's 3 big questions that you need to ask yourself. The first is, how do I get my survey to the right people? First of all, you don't want to waste people's time if, this is not really meant for them. Start with a qualifying question. If you're only looking for people who showed up to an event, your first question should be, did you show up to such and such event? And if they didn't, then it closes out the survey for them, and they don't have to go through answering all those questions for something that you're not going to use their answers for. And the second question that you need to ask yourself is, if you're missing people, when you're do your surveys and your interviews, you're going to miss people. That's just how it is. You're not going to get 100% answer rate. But the real question is, are the people that I am missing from my survey going to cause a bias? Am I missing people specifically from one group that I wouldn't see from any other group? For example, perhaps you post your survey on all the guild Facebook sites except for one guild. Then you are missing your answers are missing particularly from that one guild that you missed, and that would cause a bias. The second question that you need to ask is, am I asking the right questions? Are they clear? Are they consistent? Do people, again, you don't want to waste people's time. If you don't need to know something, why are you asking it? And this is something that even in my, professional life, it's very easy to say, well, I'm putting all this effort into putting out a survey and getting questions. You might as well answer everything that I can. And this will cause you to have longer surveys, which means less people are going to answer them. And then the third question that you need to ask is, has someone done a similar survey and or a question before? And can I reuse that in any way? This is specifically for, you might not have a survey that is exactly the same, but maybe you are looking at back pain in fighters. People have done back pain in populations over and over and over again. And if you use their questions, that means that not only are you using a standard that's established, it also means that you can compare that population to the fighters when you're looking at your data and how they're similar or dissimilar. So here are some examples of bias surveys. The first one has an issue with distribution. The example is that you want to know about the use and usefulness of your Kingdom social media page. So you post a survey on the social media page for people to fill out. So the issue with this one particularly is that, the people who answer this are going to be people who do use the social media page and use it enough to notice your survey and fill it out. So you're going to miss out on people who don't use the social media page, and also people who might use it on occasion, but don't use it enough to have noticed that there was a survey posted on the social media page. The second question is a bias in the question itself. The example is you're interested in how your kingdom's COVID response was. So you ask the populace, how bad was the kingdom's response to COVID? And of course, this one would bias your answers. You're asking how bad was this thing? And the answers are invariably going to be, oh yeah, this, here's what was bad with it, focusing all on the bad things. And it's enough that people who had a good opinion about the kingdom's response to COVID would think twice about their response from that question. They would think, oh, was there something wrong with it? I need to rethink how I'm approach it. And then the third examples of bias survey is a bias in the answer choices. So if you're interested in the age of SCA members and you ask them, you give them these categories, 10 to 25, 25 to 30, 35 to 45, 45 to 65, and 65 plus. So this is, you might laugh at this and say that, oh, of course, you're missing 5 years in there. What if you're 33? What do? You don't exist? Or, what if you're 25? Are you 10 to 25 or are you 25 to 30? But this is a common enough problem. I've seen it in, official surveys being distributed out, not in SCA, but, in the real, in the mundane world. And, if you're in that tricky situation, you're 25 or you're 33, you're thrown off. And two, you honestly don't know what to answer. And your answer is probably not going to be what they wanted you to answer. So my first thing I wanted to do was to exit out of this. Is to do a Google Forms demo. And I see Google Forms a lot in the SCA, but I wanted to show off exactly what you can do with these forms. Does anyone have any suggestions for what survey you wanted to do? Perhaps you want to see, how did people like an event, or, anything else like that? Okay, we'll just go for an event then. Let's do the service symposium. So the first thing we're going to do is look at do a qualifying question. This could be something like, did you go to the service symposium? Or it could be something like, oh, what does the SCA stand for? Maybe you're trying to make it so that people who are not in the SCA or, not doing these events or in the know, don't accidentally answer this, don't accidentally or maliciously answer these surveys. But we're going to start out with and we're going to make this a multiple choice. You either attended this event or you did not attend this event. And we're going to make this a required answer. So what you can do based off of these is perhaps you want to know exactly, you have some questions for people who did go to the 2021 Service Symposium, but you also have some questions for people who chose not to attend the 2021 Service Symposium. So what we'll do is you'll click on these three dots, and under go to descriptions is go to section based on answer. And we're going to make two new sections. This first section will be and then another section will be so if the person said yes, they did attend the 2021 Service Symposium, we're going to tell them to go to section 2. And then if they did not attend the 2021 Service Symposium, we're going to tell them to go to section 3. And then after each of these sections, we're going to submit the form. Now, within these, there's something amazing that you can do for each of these. Let me add a question. So, you have multiple choice, which is pretty easy. You can tell people exactly what to say. But you also have things like short answers, drop down boxes, check boxes. You can have people upload files. There's a lot of different things that you can do. Say that you want to actually do a, what does the SCA stand for? And, you don't want to have people, you don't want to have to go through hand and like say, oh, here's the right answer, here's the wrong answer. I'll just throw out the wrong answers. You don't want to do that by hand. There's a lot of answers going on here. Something that you can do is you can do response validation. So you get there the same way. You click on these box and under description is response validation. And there's many different things that you can do. You can have a number, you can do text or a regex expression. And if you're familiar with regular expressions, that definitely opens up your response validation. But for this one, we're just going to do text, and it has to contain Society for Creative Anachronism. And so anyone who fills out this form, if they don't put in Society for Creative Anachronism, they can't actually continue on in the survey. Another thing that you could do is what if you want to do just blank, what is your age? You can do a number and you can say, well, they're probably not going to be more than 150 years old. So we're going to make it so that the number has to be less than 150. And you can even do a custom error text when this pops up. If they put in 175, you can have it say, please recheck the age entered. So there's a lot that you can do with these and make these highly customizable. You could have different sections based on each answer that occurs. Perhaps you want it to be where people who are less than 18, add in another regex expression. And say, if you're less than 18, you are ineligible for this survey. So just to kind of show exactly what this looks like, let's do a preview of this survey. So we get to this first question, did you attend the 2021 Service Symposium? And it sends you to this, and then you can submit. However, if you did not attend the 2021 Service Symposium, it sends you to a different section. It sends you to this, what is your age? And let's say I'm 16. And it'll pop up with that I am ineligible for this survey. But if I'm 18, I can submit this and be on my way. One of the beauties of having a Google form as your survey is that when it comes to your responses, there's one thing that you can do is you can do different things. You can get email notifications for new responses. You can say exactly where responses go when they're done. And you can download the responses as a CSV file. But what I love the most about it is that you can actually create a spreadsheet that is in Google Documents, and it will automatically update with all the responses that you get. And so this makes it very easy for the next step of data. So the next step of data management, which is actually quite simplified in SCA terms, is data management. And this is the practice of, taking your data and keeping it and using it securely, efficiently, and cost effectively. When it comes to SCA, there isn't a lot of options. However, when you go to a more real world example, for me, for example, I have to have that conversation where, oh, we have data back to 1994 of all the births in this state since 1994. We need a place to keep it. It's such a big data set that it can't just be on someone's laptop. It can't just be on a random flash drive. It actually needs to be on a server of some sort. But in SCA, there's really two main choices. One of them is to keep it with Google Spreadsheets, and another option is to keep it with your operating system spreadsheet of choice. So some pros for keeping it on Google Spreadsheets, you can have multiple people working on a data set at once. One thing I would caution about this is if this is what you're doing, I would remember to make backups of your data just in case on a weekly or monthly basis. Um, and also, you can use it much more effectively if you have different operating systems. So let's say you have, an iPad and, a Windows laptop. It's much more easier to switch between those. And, same thing for if you have multiple people, if they have different operating systems, it makes it much easier to do. The reasons for keeping it on your operating system spreadsheet of choice, your operating system spreadsheet is a little more easier to use. There's no internet required. It requires a lower bandwidth. And it might just be easier for you to use because you know it more. And that's still a very valid reason to keep it on your operating system's spreadsheet of choice. So the very first thing that you're going to do when you have data is you're going to separate out your bad responses. First off, if you're only looking for people who attended an event, you would separate out responses for people who did not attend the event you were asking for reviews for. Another reason to separate out bad responses is bogus answers or didn't respond to the exclusion questions correctly. For example, to the what is the SCA, maybe they put in Society for um, Coral Activists or something like that. And, that's not right. And you don't know if they're actually a person who is in the SCA and we're supposed to be able to respond to that survey. But usually the existence of a bogus answer or a invalid response to an exclusion question means that that's a response that you need to take out. One of my examples that I love to bring up is I did a survey once for back pain in college students in a city. And one of the bogus answers that I got for, how do you get to class, car, bike, anything. I got horse and buggy. One of the people responded with horse and buggy. And, I knew that was not right because I would have seen it in the news somewhere that one of the students were using the horse and buggy to get to class. So I actually had to throw out that whole response from that person because I didn't know if the rest of their questions were taken seriously if they didn't take that one question seriously. And then the next thing that you should do is you should write up a code book for you and others. This should include things like what does each variable mean? What are the possible answers for each variable? And if there's any specific instructions for you and others. This is especially invaluable if you have multiple people working on something. Um, you know, you might laugh at this, but I've worked on data that people paid for, and they have variables that no one knows what it means because someone left and they knew what it meant, but anybody who's currently working on the project has no idea what that variable means, and it's essentially useless at that point. It's also useful to have, if you're like me and sometimes you sideline a project to focus on something for a little bit and you come back. Hopefully you still remember what that variable means, but it's also very likely you'll just look at it and you're like, I don't know what I was trying to do there. And so having a code book for you and others to look at is super invaluable. Um, and definitely taking the time, the 30 minutes to write that up is useful. So the very last thing that you'll do for data, unless you keep going and reiterate the survey, is data analytics, and this is the science of analyzing raw data in order to make conclusions about that information. So the basic analytics for most is mean, median, and mode. You know, and I will say this, median is less skewed by outliers. There's something that you can do is you can compare your mean and your median to see exactly how skewed your mean is by the outliers. And the second thing that you can probably do by yourself is variance and standard deviation. And these are basically measures of how diverse and spread out your data are. And that will tell you a little bit more about why your data looks the way it looks and how that might affect your basic analytics. And one of the things you might be asking is how do I deal with outliers? That is one of the first things that people will ask you when you start posting your results from your data. So the first thing that you can do is look at the answer to see if there is a measurement error or data entry error. For example, if you look at age and someone did put 365, you can reasonably say that there was an error there. And, if you can, try to correct the error if possible. And if you can't fix it, you might need to remove that observation because it's incorrect and it's affecting that outlier. A second thing to look at is, if is it a part of the population you are studying? If there's unusual properties or conditions, you can legitimately remove the outlier. For example, if you are doing a survey on how long it takes someone from the point they are belted to the point that they are elevated, and one of the survey answers is from someone who's not even in the SCA, and they put like, it took me 35 years to be elevated, but that person isn't in the SCA. You can legitimately remove that outlier. Just make sure that you are documenting that, and so that if anyone asks you later on, or you're thinking about it later, you can remember why you took out that answer and it was for a legitimate reason. But however, if you find that the outlier is a natural part of the population, it's not a data error, it's a part of the population, you should not remove it. So, for example, going back to the elevation survey, if you have someone who, is in the SCA, was elevated, and, they didn't put like, it took me 365 years to be elevated, you shouldn't remove it. Even if it's an outlier, such as, there's stories of people who are belted and elevated on the same day. Just as much as there are stories of people who were belted when they were 5 or 18 and it took them 30 to 40 years to be elevated. They are part of the data set. They're not, yes, they are an outlier. They are not the norm, but they are still part of the data set and they should not be removed. Okay, so we have time for this one. So analytics in Google Spreadsheets is a little different from what you might be expecting in, let's see. So one thing that you can do, especially if you are working on something that is text-based and not like answers, one thing you can do is you can do text searches. So for example, this data set is looking for the word bakie. And you can use count if expressions to look at your data set and then the specific word you're looking for. If you're looking for more than one word in each sheet, you can also use count ifs, and it looks for two different things. It's looking for does it match this in this row in this column, and does it match this in this column. So for this, for example, it's looking for this column, does it say Bakie? And if it says Bakie, does it also say red in this column? And you'll notice that this has asterisks around the red. That means specifically that there can be anything before the R in red and anything after the D in red. So, and for that example, I could have put green, red, blue in there, and it would still read red and read that in as accepting in this. Some other things, like you can get very creative in this. The functions, you have your sum, average, count, max, and min, which honestly will get you very far in basic analytics. But you can also do arrays. You can do databases. You can look at dates. Not that you'll ever use the engineering part, but you can use engineering, filters, financial information. Google Translate actually is in this. So if you are working with data that might not be in English, you can actually look at doing Google Translate in this. But the biggest one that you'll be looking at is the math one. And it gives you every single thing that you could use for this, such as, a power, product, quotient, and it gives you those, summaries for that. You also have a data section. You can do things such as you can create a filter. You can select all your data in that thing, and you can create a filter so that when you're looking at this and you want to look for a specific thing, you can select which one you're specifically looking for, or you can filter by color or sort by color. The data tool also has data validation that you could do, and you can make a pivot table, and you can do column stats. So if I select this column, I could make a column stat, and it would tell me things such as the count of the column and the distribution, if the distribution is legitimate. You can also remove duplicates. And I would strongly rethink about that before just clicking remove duplicates. I would only do this if you have a column that has a specific, such as maybe you're asking for an SCA member's SCA ID, and that is a unique number. That's the only time when I would blatantly just put remove the duplicate, so that you're not removing legitimate data.
Just like one or two.
Sorry? Oh.
Sorry, I didn't realize I turned off my.
It's fine.
I'm trying to turn off my camera, not unmute.
So those are just some of the things that you can do. Google, it's never going to be like RStudio, or if you do JavaScript or any of the legit coding, it's never going to be as robust as that. But you have people like me. I put my information at the very end so you can contact me if need be. And I'm sure there's people in your kingdom who are familiar with those programs who can help you. Um, and that's when we get to the more advanced the analytics. There's something called bootstrapping and regressions. Bootstrapping specifically, it's you're resampling the original data set, and you're replacing each answer many thousands of times to create simulated data sets. And this is how you can really look at and see exactly what are the chances that people will pick the answers that they picked. And is it by chance, that these people have done it, or is it significant that this many people chose this choice this many times? Um, Another thing that you can look at is causal modeling. So causal modeling can be more theoretical. It's a very theoretical thing, where you're just looking at exactly, what are the chances that this does this. Or it can be a more complex statistical analysis. It's very similar to bootstrapping. It takes it a little bit further. And when I was introduced to causal modeling, it was a quite a new thing on the scene that everybody was jumping on. Um, but as someone who's just started in data and might not be able to, might need a little bit help when they're looking at these things, I definitely don't expect any of you to come from this class and know exactly how to do causal modeling. But if you do, recommend me to people. And then I have a quick note about presenting your results. One thing to think about is research and data analytics specifically should be reproducible. And what that means is that every single thing that you do should be documented. You threw out this question because of this, or, you did this to your data specifically. And this is specifically so that if other people decide that they want to redo your research exactly, or, redo it, but focus on a different kingdom, maybe, they would be able to reproduce it and, you know, compare their results to your results. If you don't share how you do those things, especially in the data world, people might not trust it as much because they can't look at it and go like, this is exactly what you did, and I would be able to do it. A second point is extrapolating your results. Um, the thing about surveys and data in general is that really, if you're being very, very strict, the only conclusions you can really, really make is on the data, the people itself, which is great, if you have. But what we really want to do is take those results and apply that to more people than what the survey was about. So, for example, if you only surveyed about 50% of fighters in your kingdom, really you can say exactly what your results are about that 50%. But what you really want to do is extrapolate that and say, okay, well, all fighters are likely in this kingdom to prefer this or might have back pain on this scale. But there's a limit to extrapolating results, and this comes from you know knowing where your limits are, comes from doing this for a while and thinking about it, especially when you're presenting it to other people. For example, for the same fighter survey, you might say, oh, I can extrapolate these results for this kingdom, but also this kingdom over here that has a very similar fighter culture and rules, but I can't extrapolate it to another kingdom who has a very different fighter culture and has a little bit variance in rules than we do. And then the third thing to think about is, and you'll hear data scientists say this over and over and over again, correlation does not equal causation. All of this data, except for when you get into causal modeling, strongly you want to use the term correlation. You know, fighters who don't follow the rules are correlated to back pain, for example. I haven't done that survey, but you can say that if that's what your survey and your data show. But you can't say, well, not following the rules causes you to have back pain. And the only reason that you would start saying causation is if you're doing the causal modeling, the more advanced statistics where you're actually getting into causation at that point. And ending at 12:50. So here is my contact information. You can email me, you can call me, or you can visit my blog spot. You know, please feel free to contact me, and I'll share this slideshow with everyone on the thing. So you can view it. But the overall